What's up, everybody? Tom Fazio here. Let's talk about walking meditation. So, walking meditation. One of those funny practices that unless you have spent a little bit of time in the Far East, maybe practicing some Tai Chi, maybe even visiting a Buddhist temple throughout Thailand, it's not an uncommon practice in the monastic tradition, but we don't see it so much back in the West. And the reason is pretty simple. It's hard work and not much happens. And not much happens because it's not useful. Not much happens because it is an incredibly difficult practice. You have to really have a foundation in either seated or standing meditation, and ideally standing meditation. But why might you do it? Why might you take it on? Now, full disclosure, I do it sometimes. It's not a focal point of my training, but it's one of those transitional tools that I will sometimes implement for myself or teach to my clients to help them transition some of the skills they're acquiring in silent practice into maybe a more embodied experience. And why? Well, if you guys have spent any time meditating, you've probably had the experience where you have phenomenal insights, you maybe find great connection in those moments of silence, but then you go out and maybe you see your partner in life, your boss, coworker, subway, sounds, smells, it could be a million things, but those old triggers are still alive in you. For better or worse, we have a lot of neurological conditioning, and it's very easy for the same types of experiences and things to trigger the same types of experiences and responses. So, we have this phenomenon where seated meditation, standing meditation, we might actually find those points of connection to get beyond those self-centered judgments and general perspectives, right? And they can be magical moments. Nervous system relaxes, shoulders drop, tension falls from the body, the mind feels good until you leave the studio and some asshole says something stupid to you, right? So we've all been in this situation. The value in some moving practices, and you might find obvious cases in the case of Tai Chi where it's predominantly movement oriented, or Aikido. Some of these have movement translations of meditation, right? These are supposed to be, at least at the higher levels, embodied practices where your awareness through your meditative practice is not localized. It's holistic, it's global. The sensitivity in your fingers and toes, your calves, your ankles is just as much as it might be on the breath, the philtrum, the dantian, any of these primary focal points. The body becomes alive with information. So we're constantly receiving information and feedback. Every time that you take a step, billions of neurons are firing and going off and sending information to the brain, right back down. Maybe the brain, maybe not, might be the central nervous system. But your body is constantly processing. It's got this feedback, right? I have a thought and I express, or maybe I just know where I'm going and I'm on autopilot, walking from one place to another, checking my phone spontaneously to see if I've gotten a text message. But then we have those moments of conscious awareness where I'm actively intentionalizing my movement or thought, etc. Right? So whether we're aware of it or not, there is this constant reflexivity between intention and reception, right? I'm receiving information, data is coming through my entire nervous system. So in a lot of ways, what we get with standing meditation, walking meditation, that we don't get with seated meditation is that conscious awareness that extends throughout the entire body. The extremities begin to come alive, and not just my awareness, my perception, maybe even my sense of being throughout my body. Now, as soon as I'm standing, I have to become aware of more points of tension, right? I have to become aware of more subtle energy that may be through the lower body, right? And why we might extend this now into walking meditation. I had my first chain whip instructor and primary Qigong instructor in the north of China, Master Su. He was a phenomenal teacher, but he had several people on different tracks. I was mostly doing weapons work and breathing work and meditation. There were a couple guys that were interested in, what we know kind of as dim mak, or, what some of us know, at least in the Cantonese version, is dim mak, right, or death touch. So there's people interested in this. He happened to have a little bit of knowledge or skill in this domain. He was a phenomenal martial artist. Scope of training was tremendous. So he had them working on a few things. One was finger hardening and some of the skills required to actually be able to poke and penetrate the body with firm fingers, right? His were, super developed. But the other part of that was slow movement and slow walking. And so he had them, it was comical, but he had them doing this for weeks, right? Not a few sessions, but like for an hour or two a day for several days. Because they asked him one question, which was, well, how do we bridge the gap and then learn these skills? And he said, well, if you want to move fast, you got to move slow. He would always emphasize this, and he'd just say, slow walking, back and forth, very slow, right? Slower, slower. So there was a point where, I was talking to one of the guys, he was so frustrated. He was just like, I've been here for 3 weeks, or, he's been doing that segment for 3 weeks. And he was like, I'm going to go back to the States, and people are going to ask me what I did, at the Shaolin Academy, and I'm going to tell them, yeah, I just kind of walked up and down the floor for hours a day. And so there are obstacles or barriers to overcome within this practice, right? It's not the type of thing that a few hours or attempts do anything. They don't. You need to practice repeatedly for an extended period of time before you can start to transfer some of your other skills into that domain. But why is it valuable? It's valuable because we move faster than we meditate. And one of the challenges, right, and if you are familiar at all with flow or flow theory, one of the challenges is that if the challenge exceeds my capacity to be present by too high of a degree, I'm automatically drawn out of myself and into the default mode network, processing center of the brain, and no longer sensing, feeling, aware of what's going on. This happens naturally. We don't even have to try, right? So most of the time, if we're stressed at all, if we're moving through space and we're just trying to get from point A to point B, we're ruminating on a bunch of stuff, we're not present to begin with, but we also don't have any sensation in the body. We're not connected. So this is really, it's a transference tool. And it allows you, like he was doing in that practice, having these guys move slowly. Why is that valuable? Well, in some cases, like even to avoid the higher level conversations on chi theory, if we just look at the biomechanics, moving very slowly through space creates greater degrees of tension, right? My arms quickly throwing a punch versus slowly throwing a punch, I'm going to be aware of points of tension and sticking points in that movement that are going to be obvious that they wouldn't be when I move quickly, right? So those people that just want to get in, learn the craft, go balls out, in training, you can get good that way. But what you wind up seeing is natural athletes progress, and people that are less coordinated, they just don't make it because they get in martial arts, they lose more frequently, they get beat up, they just don't acquire the skill. What would happen to those people if they just moved more slowly, more frequently, right? The conscious awareness of those stuck points throughout movement would become much more heightened, right? They'd be much more sensitive to what's going on in the body, the expression of their thoughts in space. And so this gives you the space and the tool then to transfer that into more stuff, right? Just moving, we underestimate the challenge of moving through space and doing anything. We practice meditation in isolation, and then you expect to be different people in the real world. But this could be an infinite chasm between the two. It takes a ton of training. So I've talked in some of the other videos about some of the tools that are quite useful. Inquiry, fantastic practice. Am I weightless? How about now? How do I feel right now? Am I aware of what's going on? Another one is setting awareness triggers, right? If I'm finding the challenge between transitioning, it's possible that I have the capacity, but I don't have the skill yet. Part of that is just forcing myself to be aware on a regular basis. I mentioned saying, okay, every time I do this thing, I'm going to stop for 2 seconds and reflect. Am I aware of my breath? Am I aware of my body in space, my structure? Is my breath in the abdomen? And just use this as a reflexive moment to just trigger that connection, that presence, right? And if that's too hard, sticky notes, one by the door, one by the toothbrush, one over the bed. Force yourself to see it and ask yourself that question until it becomes a reflex and you wind up having more conscious moments. So those are more of a perspective implementations, perspective shifts. This is an example of an embodied practice that helps us move from one stage to the other. Just the act of intentional awareness while moving creates an immediate transference of that skill, and it allows it to transfer into all types of other day-to-day types of things. Washing the dishes, if people still do that today. But washing the dishes, walking to your car, small basic daily things that can be moments of presence and moments that are full of life, but that we turn that off, right? We're spending 95% of the time on autopilot. In the default mode network, the monkey mind is just kind of running away with things. So that's why one might consider this. And I will say this, look, there might be a few technical elements to it, but if you understand how to sit, structuring your seated posture, if you understand how to stand, I've covered this in other videos, now just walk. and do it very slowly. You don't have to worry so much about coordinating breath with movement. While that might be an element of Qigong practice, for general walking meditation or mindful awareness practice in motion, keep it simple. Focus on the foundations to cultivate the tools, the structural elements, right? Maybe you have the elements of the tongue and the perineum, and maybe you're breathing into the lower abdomen. Develop those skills. But in movement, just allow yourself to be globally aware. Ask yourself, reflect, what do I feel ongoing, right? Constantly moving, walking through space. What do I feel? Is there tension in my calves? Is there tension in my ankles? Are the feet loose and relaxed? Are the shoulders drawn down and back? And as I'm moving, can I do it methodically and smoothly, or am I finding gaps in that process? And that's what we try to work out over time, to become aware of those points of tension, release them, and then find that connection, that sense of presence ongoing. That's all I got. So, hey, if you got any thoughts, leave them in the comments. Any questions, leave them in the comments. Thanks for sharing this time with me. And until the next time, be weightless.